Tuesday, June the 1st, 2021. I'm Ted Catchell, I chair the board. My colleagues are Charles Van der Willen and Ruth Gaines, and we're here to work through the agenda as it has been posted. The first item, however, is just to call the roll. Clerk, please.
Dr. Catchell,
Yes.
Mr. Van der Willen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines. Yes.
All present. Given previous information, I'm going to adjust the agenda since we have a tax representative here to represent two of them, and the rest of them it appears we will be handling through the telephone. So, board, that means the next item that I'm going to deal with is 1446 on our printed agenda, and then after that, we'll deal with 1447. Okay. And you are here to represent the Birch Page LLC. Yes, sir. Okay, let me read what I've got it printed, and then you guys can address it. This property board is at 601 South Boston Avenue here in Tulsa. It was previously on for $3,050,000. They were proposing before the informal to leave it at that. After that, in his formal appeal, he said he believes it should be corrected down to $2 million. The property was acquired in July 2019. Annualized income for August, December 2019 was $426,735 for garage rental. Last year, due to slowdown, the annual income dropped to $224,847. Requesting reduction as current year has not increased as desired. However, I have an orange tab here that suggests there may be an agreement. Who's
Yes.
speaking to that?
Yes, sir. Tim Grass, Tulsa County Assessor's Office. I spoke with Mr. Kenyon here, and we have agreed to a value with the owners at a value of $2,600,000.
$2,600,000 as the agreed upon fair market value. I so move by agreement of the owner and being represented today, and the tax assessor's staff information.
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded to adjust to $2,600,000 by agreement. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Catchell,
Yes.
Mr. Van der Willen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines.
Yes.
Yes, it carries. This is the fair market value established by and this, I think, Tim, wait, that up there goes down. All right, the next item, board, is, as I indicated, 1447 on our agenda. It is the Phil Tower LTD property. And it is located, as probably most of us know, at 427 South Boston Avenue here in Tulsa downtown. It was previously on for $6,966,000. The assessor was proposing to continue that as the current assessment, and the appeal suggests it should be lowered to $5 million even. For the following reasons: operating property includes garages 005009201 38850, $2,858,600. Combined P and L indicates a value of $6,736,448 using a 10.5 cap rate. Property has a mixture of commercial and condos. Recently added condos are slow to rent and commercial rental is still slow in downtown. The value, $6,736,448 minus the garage, $2,858,600 equals $3,877,848 if we assume the $5 million. All right, that's what I have in the printed record. Please identify yourself for the.
My name is Daryl Kenyon, and I'm representing the property owner of Bill Tower.
And obviously, you can add anything you want. If you have other documents you want us to look at, we can.
Okay. I did get, after the time, the cutoff of last Thursday, additional information regarding the financial performance, January through April.
Yeah.
And an additional rent roll for May 31st. Which I can hand to you and let you see those if you desire. But basically, the run rate is the same. The monthly operating expenses and income are relatively the same. The problem is kind of twofold. In 2006, they added apartments to the Bill Tower, which you guys.
And they're condominium apartments?
There's 3 per floor, so yeah, you could call them condominiums.
But I mean, are they sold? Is it
No, they're leased.
It's totally
So
sold.
everyone's leased.
Right.
And they renovated, I believe, level 12 through 20. If I remember right, it was like a $4 million renovation cost. I can't remember. It's like 130, 140,000 per unit cost to renovate. And interestingly, as of January 1st, all but one of them was leased. Today, there's one more vacant, so there's 2 vacant. The problem is they can't get the rent that they would like to have. Market rent.
I think you're gonna have to, anything that is presented to the board, even orally, but if you have it in writing, we probably should have those.
Okay.
You don't have to take us through them all if you do not wish to, but I think for the clerk's purpose, she's gonna have it.
Now, the only real difference in this information I'm giving you here and what you already have, the P&L is basically the same.
Yeah.
But what I've added out to the right is the P&L information of January through April. And I sent that to the assessor's office this morning as well.
Okay. Let me just ask the assessor staff, have you seen this yet?
I have.
Okay, thank you.
And what I'm finding is that the condos, let me find the exact numbers here. The market rent on the condominiums it's $91,000 and they're currently getting $48,000 per month. So some of them are leased at half market value. My guess that would be because there might be a little bit of an overbuild in downtown Tulsa for condominiums.
And
So
these are,
I'm sorry,
no, go
are
ahead.
they business at lower levels and condos above? Or
Yes, sir.
how's it
Yes, sir.
working out?
But these are residences.
Yes.
Okay. And
For-
you're saying the annual rental was the number you just gave us?
No, that's monthly. Monthly rent.
What
monthly rental. Their estimate of market rent is $97,000
Per month.
per month.
For all the condos.
Yes. They're getting 40,
So they're getting roughly 50% of what they think the market should bear in that. Okay.
and I'm assuming that market value they've come up with is through their interaction with other condominiums in downtown Tulsa.
Well, let's hear what the assessor thinks of that. I don't know. I'm not privy to that kind of downtown rent.
And let me go ahead and add that on the commercial side.
Yeah.
There is like 117,000 available square feet, and 44,000 of that is vacant
I understand.
and has been for a long period of time and still is.
And what percent is that? Approximately.
41% vacant on the commercial. There's 27 total apartments or condominiums, 3 per floor. And 1 was vacant at the first year and are 2 vacant now. And so basically what I did was I took their income statement, removed non-allowables, which is depreciation, property tax, and capitalized it. Now, let me also explain that there is one issue that kind of complicates the whole thing is this property operating statement also includes the parking garage, which is on a separate parcel. And the owner didn't realize that he had to appeal it when his notice went out in February. It had a cap and it was a 5% up to the cap. And so he failed to appeal it or notify me that it needed to be appealed also. Therefore, the whole value of the operating statement, when you look at it, should include the parcel that the garage sits on as well as the fill tower.
It is not on the tax roll as a separate.
Yes,
It is.
yes, sir. And that's the problem I got to is, piecing out how much of the value should go to the garage and how much should go to the fill tower itself.
So is that a dead issue until next appeal time?
Yes, sir. I appealed it, but I got the answer I expected. Next year, maybe. Because theoretically, both of these should have been appealed at the same time. It would have been much easier to look at both of them together because the income statement and expenses do include the operation of the garage as well.
Okay, so that's where the confusion comes, is in the income statement.
Yes,
I get it. Okay, so you've got an income statement that includes income from a parcel that was not appealed, even though the other
yes,
was.
sir.
Got it.
That's correct. And so when I capitalize it out, I use a 10.5, which is probably too lenient. But, I had to have something to start with. I used that because the commercial is almost 50% vacant. And so when I do that, I come up with a value of 6,700,000 for both parcels.
Yeah.
And so, if I take
the garage out,
take the garage out, then you should be able to arrive at what's on the fill tower.
that's where you're recommending 5.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I know that probably from the assessor's viewpoint, they're looking at not only the garage, but 2 operating units within the building itself. You got the commercial, which you got to calculate, and you got the condos, which you got to calculate. And I think the way they're calculating now is the full market value, if fully leased. I don't know how much allowance they're giving for vacancy, et cetera, but, our reality is that the building hasn't performed very well since the condos were added. They didn't achieve, the potential that they were hoping for. And it's because they can't get the rent.
Yeah, I can believe it.
You know, and the commercial side, you know, downtown Tulsa suffered for many years. You know, most of your values of the properties are fraction of what they were 20 years ago. But this building used to be owned by an old company.
Yeah, and the county now has renovated it. We have a penthouse suite for the commissioners, let me tell you. Not everybody gets invited up there.
You know, so basically that's what we're down discussing is, what should be the correct value? And the tower is on at 6,9,666, and the garage is on at 2,858,800, for a total of 9,824,600. And if I cap my income, the cap rate would be 7.2 to get to where the values currently sit.
At the 6.
Yes, sir. So, you know, to me, it seems a little high because of that difference. And the sheet I just gave you on the front, on the far right, shows the year-to-date April operations. And there it's running at about the same as it did for all of last year. So, you know, there may have been some COVID effect, but it sure hasn't been cured yet. We're, you know, almost halfway through the year. And I doubt if it is anytime soon.
COVID question, how is the profession carving out the COVID dip, if you will? I mean, is it a one-time,
A lot
a
of-
2-year thing, or?
A lot of my clients didn't have a COVID effect to speak of. I do, you know, not a lot, but I do some fast food restaurants, and they put all their attention into carryout, you know, and bang, some of them did almost as well. But then you look at your sit-down restaurants where they have suffered tremendously. Some of them gone. You know, but your fast food carryout stuff, Sonic probably did better than they've ever done. You know, it's strange how the market is affecting some places, not others. You know, there's some office buildings that have gone completely dark here in Tulsa, but it depends on the business. You know, I do some work with some oil field companies, and they were shut down considerably, but then when it got cold in the wintertime, everything cranked back up. You know, so it's hard to say specifically the question, what's the COVID effect? You got to look at each little industry specific.
Well, you gotta look at it, but then how do you factor it into, I don't know, a 5-year swing or 3 years? Definitely there's a hiccup.
Yes, but I do not know what the COVID effect is. You would like to think it's 1 year, but it's not going to be. You know, it could be 2, it could be 3. For downtown office buildings in Tulsa, you know, they were already suffering before all this started. You know, and so.
But COVID didn't cause any big deals to fall through.
To my knowledge, no.
Did you try and not that you had to, but did you try and look at the market? Did you try and say what is any downtown building of similar age and structure sold? Or maybe hear some of that occur, but
No, I didn't specifically say it. I did look at, and I have one copy of the 2019 operating statement, and it was almost basically the same as 2020. You know, so I can't say for specifically COVID affected this. I think if it did, it was more in the parking than anything else, you know, because there's nobody coming downtown. Right. You know, so the operating statement suffered there some. But, you know, the people who were already leased and living in the condos, they're not going to go anywhere. You know, and I don't think the Phil Tower had any big, large tenants because there's a lot of different spaces. You know, and it's your big vacancies that really kill the office buildings.
Well, and this is obviously, as you pointed out, a mixed use now, so. Anything else before?
No, not really.
I'd like to ask, has this property been before the board previously or?
I would think it's been several years, but I bet it has.
Don't remember, that's the.
I may have even been down here with it sometime in the past. I used to do a lot of buildings downtown back during the late zeros, whatever you want to call it, last decade, through maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. I represented the Canbar properties for a number of years. You know, they came in and overpaid for everything, and it was a battle and a struggle and interesting through that process. You were probably
Yes,
here that time too, so.
yeah, I remember the Campers.
Yeah.
What do you, well, you need to go over that. Ruth, did you want to follow up somewhere?
No, yeah.
Okay, and Charles, what about you? I noticed you were perusing the more recent financials. I think what he's saying is he just offered them as evidence that there's no obvious change in the financial performance from the year that he is appealing.
I guess my struggle is how much of a dip do you give to the COVID issue? No doubt businesses hurt, stymied, whatever. But is it a long termer? I don't think not. I don't know how to factor that one time hickey.
I could say that I can remember 10 or 15 years ago when I came downtown, you couldn't park at all across the street. Never any available parking. There's parking everywhere down here right now. I mean, I pulled into yours and almost thought I was in the wrong place because there was 3 cars out there. But across the street, it's pretty vacant too, so. You know, there's some, unless a lot of people didn't come downtown because of what's going on the other side too, today.
Yeah. All right. Please go ahead and introduce yourself to the board again and for the record, and then share with us what you wish us to look at.
Okay. I am Bert Bailey with Tulsa County Assessor's Office. The subject property, we're taking a look at,
I'm sorry, how many did you give us?
should be one for each. Is it not?
Here's one, and you'll get it back, but then she hands you one. All right, after we mess with it. All right, Betty, please.
Okay. The subject property was built in 1928, built office building, sits on the corner of Fifth and Boston. The net rentable is 144,635 square feet. The gross is 204,735 per square footage. When I got their rent roll, I actually came up with an average rent of $13.88 per foot. When I went to CoStar to kind of see what the average market rent was for the area, it gave me $17 a square foot. Their actual vacancy per their P&L statement was 32.14%. The market, again, looking at CoStar, said it was 12%. The land value, we have it on for $30 per foot, which is consistent with the offices in the area. And for the informal, there was no change to what the county had already decided at 6.966.
And to just make sure, again, as he pointed out, there's this difficulty of the garage being really assessed in a different, that you guys treat it as a separate assessment, is that
That
correct?
is correct.
Okay,
Yes,
Thank you.
it's on a different person.
All right.
And so if you look at page 2, I did an income approach for the offices, because that's the department that I'm actually in, this office. And so with that, using his P and L statement, because I couldn't get clarity for their additional income of, what was parking income, the other income, I didn't even use it in my, income approach. And I'm still coming up with, again, I had average rent of $13.88. I used a rent lower than my average of $13 a square foot. And then I used a 32% vacancy. With their expenses per the P and L was 89%, but that's extremely high. So I did 45%. And then I have my cap at 9%, which is actually pretty good for downtown area. And I'm still coming up with 6.2 just for the office, building. So then I leaned to my, coworker, Sarah, who actually does the apartments, condos.
So
Yeah, that's
this
on page
is,
3.
this is in the same assessment,
It's in the
but
same
for different floors, as he was talking about the apartments, okay,
That's
please.
correct. And so Sarah did an income approach as well for the condos / apartments. She used a 17% vacancy. She did not add any additional income to it. See, her operating expenses, she used 30%. She did the cap of 7.5, and she came up with a total, her overall, adjusted value at 4 million. 4 million. So again, I did not, change my value because with her condos, her income approach on the condos being, 4 million, I came up with 4.2. Now we're above, and the garage is not even being in consideration.
But now, would have this been treating the floors that have been turned into apartments as a separate assessment, or would you have been, or would have had to be added into that? Because if that was true, we should be talking, as you say, the value inclusion is 10,313 for the tower.
For the tower, yes.
Yeah. And you guys have it on though at 6,
We had for 6.9, 6.
which is really only the office part, according to, more or less, according to your analysis. That is, you had it on at 6.2 or something for just the offices.
The 6.966 is actually for the whole tower.
No, I understand that, but what I'm trying to understand is, I'm just trying to point out what you are showing the board anyway, is that the informal decision suggests just for the offices that those floors would be 6,243,000 or 7.8. And you have, and you would add the 4 million, and you'd end up with the 10 for the total building. Is that correct? In terms of your presentation, that's all I'm
Yes,
really asking.
in terms of this purpose.
So the 6.9 that is currently on and that you're recommending, then is a substantial reduction from what your own analysis suggests.
Yes.
Those are my questions of Bailey. The members of the board, before we give him a chance to respond to some of what she has presented here.
How does he's indicated that the parking lot, or the parking garage is making a difference in showing out. Did you find any effect to that?
I did, that's why I omitted it from my income approach. Any additional income, the park income, I did not even add it. We went off of the rent.
So that would be in addition to, that would be in addition.
Yeah, it would have been more.
Separate account.
Well, it's still not quite clear to me. Is the parking garage assessed as a separate account?
Yes,
It is, okay, then that. But what you were saying is when they presented the information, your owner presented the information, they conflated those two incomes. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what.
The operating statement includes both.
Right, got it. Okay. Charles, what about you? You have questions? Action.
I do, but I'm not sure how to voice them.
Okay.
I don't know how to, totally carve out. I think there's some COVID dip here, but I don't know if that is, is that calculated into your number, or is it just long range?
Is what calculated to my number.
He's worried about, does the impact of our pandemic this last year, how has that affected your approach to valuing this particular property?
And then how do you recover from that? Lower the base, it takes some period of time to work back out.
I believe it's in our cap rate, where we would sit, we get it back, sometime away. I'm not really sure how to answer that question. But I did take into account, which is why I used their actual vacancy and then, given their expenses. And then, 10.5, for cap rate downtown, it was too high, so I went with 9, which would be more on a higher scale. So that was in the ways I took into account. And try to get to 6.2.
Ruth, did you have any further questioning? No, I guess it was Charles, you were working on it, but what? Well, let me say some things and I'll to the board more than anybody. I think other than the most general sense that he's showing us what's still going on this year, well, of course, as a piece of general evidence, it's fine, but it should not affect our attempt to evaluate it as of January 1, obviously. The other thing is, as he said, he was working with some difficult numbers. I'll let him respond again if I'm still not getting it. But that since they included their parking revenue, even though it's separately assessed as another parcel by the county, that it's difficult for us to understand the overall results in terms of an income approach. I was going to ask both of them, well, I asked him, but I was going to ask Ms. Bailey, did you try? I mean, I don't know whether there's any comparable buildings downtown that sold within the last couple of years to give you any sense of a comparison with the Bill Tower. I mean, I realize it's a historic building, and it's hard to find probably a comparable, but have we had any sales of these big buildings downtown over the last couple of years?
There was not a count with the same mix of use that had with recent sale to that.
Well, it would be difficult to find one, I'm sure.
I would like, have you seen her work up? What, how do you?
Yeah, I got it about 15 minutes ago.
One of the other questions we realized, but tell us what you've heard, both of you, the board has heard both of you in your initial presentation, but go ahead, raise whatever questions or comments you want about her presentation or our understanding, at least as I've tried to articulate some.
The big disparity I see is in their approach to calculating the expenses. The total expense they have on the commercial and the residential, their total expense is $637,000. That's about half what the actual P&L was last year. The P&L, and I don't know if she's included property taxes or not, but I removed the property taxes and still came up with $1,270,000 in total expenses. And on the two that she has, it's 637.
Now, she did, when he's talking about is this page, if you
Yes,
want to look at his income analysis.
Yes, sir. Now, granted, the two pieces she has there did not include the garage expense, so there would be some more additional expense, but it's hard for us to ferret out the specific pieces that go with the garage, but the garage operating expense is not actually that much. It's relatively low. You probably have an elevator expense and, some cleaning. And I'm not sure if we do, I'm sure there's some security, but those are going to be relatively small expenses overall. So, in defense of where I'm looking versus where they're looking, their expenses are a lot lower than what the actual P&L statement has indicated. Both 2019, 2020, and our running rate year to date. Last year's monthly average was 105,000, and actually we're running at 131,000 per month this year. So, if I would be frank and say, where's the big gap? I would say, I think they're underestimating expense, quite frankly. It's a good approach to try to look at both of them.
Yeah.
But then the problem is, how do you move the expenses to the appropriate one? Because it is, a mixed use property. But overall, expenses are greater than what they've allowed. And I would say that their approach is a total pro forma approach. And I've tried to present reality, what's happening right now on the ground, which is the actual information provided by the CPA, which works for the property owner.
How would you characterize the questions he's raised about that?
Well, again, in reference to expenses, on his performance, he has 89.3%. And looking at CoStar, that is like very high. So I did try to meet him in the middle and come at 45, we round up to 90% of his expenses to come down to 45% of his expenses, which kind of be a little bit more average. And again, in my, as for my square footage, even though their average rent per their rent roll is $13.80, which is almost 14. They're advertising 14, which also doesn't mean they're getting it. I came down to 13. I used the actual vacancy that they reported, and then at 89% expenses is it's almost 90%. I just think that's extremely high. So again, cut that in half. But given you could not differentiate the expenses for the garage or the building in and of itself. So
Now, when you did your income for apartments, wasn't that different? Oh,
yeah, that would be Sarah.
But the expense total there is their actual expense reported to you.
Sarah Alcott, Tulsa County Assessor's Office. I prepared that report just for the apartment section. And yes, the expenses on that are market expenses. But when I looked over the expenses that they reported in their informal packet, they aligned pretty closely in terms of the overall expense ratio that I used on my performance. So it wasn't too far apart from what, but it was hard, it was difficult because this is a property where the income and expenses are all reported on 3 different portions: the parking, the apartments, the mixed use, right? So it was kind of hard to pick out. It wasn't really detailed out like that for me. So,
But I'm just trying to be clear. I hope that I'm asking both of you now. He's saying he has reported the actual expenses, right, and used those.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the question is, the reported expenses you have his, I assume that is his CPA sent to you. What did you use his actual expenses when you were trying to do them, or was there some way you moved them around that you thought was more appropriate? I'm not.
you know what I did? I applied market expenses on my income pro forma, and I cross-referenced and came up with a percentage of what I thought he was reporting as the apartment only expenses on his financials. When I got a percentage from his financials that applied to apartments only, it lined up pretty well with market. So to answer your question 100%, it lines up closely, but I am using market parameters on that performance.
Okay. So in that sense, the expenses went up based on what you see as going in the market, or they went down?
Down. The expenses that were reported on the financials
All
were
right.
a little bit far outside. They're a little bit higher than market.
But he is reporting their actual experience. What you're doing is perfectly appropriate given your responsibilities, but I'm just saying, I want to make sure the board understood the difference in the numbers. Charles, what have you've been worrying about this COVID thing? It seemed to me that the issue, not only, well, I have still some question about the business of condominium rentals. That was the reason I was kind of returning to those expenses particularly, but what are you concerned about as another CPA auditor when you look at the way they are dealing with these differently between the county and the tax representative, the owner?
I'm not sure I have an exact answer to your question, but I'm saying someplace between the 7 million bucks and the 5 million bucks. Cut maybe in half to go.
You're not worried about the fact that when you add in this other approach to the apartments, you end up with 10 million to start off with, because it seemed to me that that is kind of being, and here I may be wrong, I'll give him a chance to respond. It's almost like we're ignoring that when we come up with a 6, 9, or 7, as you're saying. That's already, the county has already discounted in some way down from what Ms. Bailey is showing us as a 10 million plus, when she tries to understand how to include the incomes for both the office and the apartments into one parcel, as opposed to, and excluding the garage, which is assessed separately. So it wasn't included. But that, maybe that has no impact on your sense of what's going on in this property.
I think there were smart people on both sides.
Yeah, sure.
That came to $2 million apart. So someplace down the middle, I think, I would be.
Yes,
One of the
please.
difficulties with this property, when you look at the expenses and it appears to be high, is kind of a twofold deal. When you have a building, it takes so much to operate a period.
Sure.
And, you know, if you have vacancy of 40%, you still got to operate everything. Your security is going to be the same. You know, your electricity might be a little less. Your elevator costs are going to be the same. Your insurance is going to be the same. So a lot of your expenses are the same. And they not only have the vacancy on the commercial, but there's the issue of the residential portion. They're not getting the rent that the pro forma approach would indicate. It's half. So your
But how do
percentage
you recover from that?
time, you hope.
I don't understand that whole business about what they expected when they did all that improvement and what they're.
I don't either. How
That's,
many condos are in the downtown now?
I mean, really, I live in a.
They're still building.
Downtown.
You know, they built that top building across from the BOK Center. Why? When half of downtown was vacant already.
Well, there's getting ready to be another one to come up now.
I know. And they just got bought out.
Surely there's another oil boom coming. We just.
Surely.
Now, if I understood correctly, you indicated COVID, you didn't see a problem with COVID, or you didn't see.
Not necessarily, but I think that's going to hamper their ability to recover.
Right, but it's not reflected in what you're saying today.
Not dramatically, no, because the apartments were already rented. You know, people stayed in the apartments.
But the biggest problem is they're just not getting the rent that they had hoped.
Oh,
yes,
They're
ma'am.
going for half.
They have a
just
top line problem.
Yeah, right. And the reason, I was going in this roundabout way is, given my approach, I'm saying, I think they got a pretty good break at 6.966. I'm inclined to sustain. I understand his analysis, how he got to his 5 million number, but it seems to me it's still not persuasive, not because of COVID, but because of, I'm still looking at the analysis that shows me, well, there's another way you could look at this as the building is a little bit more than 10 billion if it ever achieves its potential there. So I'm thinking, how does the county catch up with that over the next 5 years? Now, am I just totally out to lunch, Charles or Ruth? You think Charles's proposal that we essentially do the Solomon, split the baby and come up with something like 5.7 and say that's all we can do today, or 6? I don't know. What are you really proposing, Charles? Give me a number.
Trying to stay right in the middle of the road, be 6.5.
6.5. What about you, Ruth? Are you feeling like Charles, we've got to go down some, but certainly not up as I'm pushing for? Please,
I would go with the 6.5, Charles.
you can live with that one. Okay, well, I'm certainly not going to protest against your proposal. Either one of you want to have a last shot at the board, but it sounds like you're going to get 6.5 is what they're proposing to do, and I'll certainly go along with it. Give you a last shot at anybody who needs it. Okay. I'll ask one of my colleagues to move that motion and the other to second it.
I move we set the fair value at 6.5 million.
Second motion.
It's been moved and seconded to adjust the fair market value today on this property to $6,500,000 as the fair market. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes.
Mr. Van Willing,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know if downtown Tulsa will ever recover.
Hey, yeah,
Ready to get a new house. 7 or 8 story building.
I don't understand.
This and this. I think that's all we got.
Apparently there's a law firm that's already signed in.
Well, wasn't, one of the old Williams companies moving, building a new building? Where the old spaghetti warehouse was?
Yeah.
That was WPX, yeah.
Are they still going to finish it? Because they got bought out, didn't they?
Yeah.
There's some of it.
Yeah, got it, thanks. All right, we got moved on. Now we're gonna do telephone calls. We're going back up to the top of the agenda. Yes, that was the only, because Meryl's here, I moved it. That was all. Hello. Good afternoon. Is this Mr. Scott Taylor?
It sure is.
Good. Well, we're calling you from the Tulsa County Equalization Board today. I'm Ted Catchell. I chair the board. My colleagues are Charles Vanderwillen and Ruth Gaines, and we're here to hear your protest on this property. Usually the way I go about it, Mr. Taylor, is I'll read in what I've got in the formal documentation, that is the initial statement of your appeal. And then you may go through the attachments you've already submitted or suggest other things you want to bring the board through. And of course, we'll give the tax assessor staff who's handling this protest a chance to speak to the matter before we make a final decision. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Here we go then. This is DXC Technology Services LLC. The property we're talking about, board, is at 7400 North Lakewood Avenue East here in Tulsa. It was put on the roll at $149,880,200. They're proposing to leave it at that after the informal. He says that he believes it should be restated to a corrected value of $90,400,000 for the following reason: the proposed 2021 assessment exceeds the true market value of the subject property. I have a handout here. Now, is this the one from you or, okay, then the stuff that you've attached, if there's anything you particularly want the board to look at, we have all the attachments in front of us. Please take us through that, Mr. Taylor.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the value of this property today. If I may, I'd like to go through just very quickly what I've submitted and what's in front of you in a broad overview of our opinion of this value of this property. We looked at the, I'm sorry?
We didn't say anything to you, but you did cut out. I don't know why. Just go for it again. We'll see. Hopefully our technology won't get in the way.
I submitted the income analysis. We believe this is the most direct approach to valuing the property because it looks at market rents, market vacancies, operating expenses, and of course, market cap rates on similar properties in this particular market. And so, if I may, I'll go briefly through the income approach that I submitted and a little overview of the property. It was built in 2001. It has approximately, and I'll be specific, I say approximately, but it has 429,912 square feet of space. We believe that the property would rent for $20 a square foot. And so if you take that, and I'll get to the rents in detail here in a second, but continuing on down with the income approach, we gave it a 5% vacancy and collection loss. Again, that's just a market, determined 5%. And we came down to an effective gross income of this property. Again, looking at what it would rent, what an investor would net effective gross income would be approximately $8,168,328 on an annual basis. Then we get to the operating expenses. This is a triple net rent that we've done here, so you won't see operating expenses such as property taxes, leasing costs, or utilities, because all of those typically in the triple net are paid by the tenant. So to the investor who would own this property and look at the return that they get, the operating expenses would be minimal compared to say a full lease where you have multi-tenants involved and you're gonna have, the owner of the property paying the taxes and utilities maybe. So our operating expenses was estimated at 17% on a triple net again, giving us a NOI, an estimated NOI, net operating income of $6,800,000 roughly. We capped that at 7.5%, and that's how we came with a rounded number of $90,400,000. Again, we believe the income approach is the most direct approach to getting to the fee simple market value. What would it invest? What would a market value sale look like as of the assessment date, 1/1/21, based on market rents and operating expenses cap rates? I will note, I'm an employee of CBRE. I have access to a lot of market data, and that includes professional appraisers within the firm. I did run this by the appraisal group within my group here, and they said I was probably being a little conservative on a couple of things, which would only have lowered my opinion of value or our opinion of value. They said that my 5% vacancy and collection loss was probably a little low at 5%. 10% would probably be more of a market vacancy rate. And the other thing that really stood out at this was the cap rate of 7.5%. They said that typically a property of like this in this market, which they do appraisals, a lot of appraisals in Tulsa, would be 8 to 10%, which again would only lower the value from the $90 million that we're asking for today. Briefly going through the rental comps, there's no two properties alike, so it's very difficult to find rental comps. But what we did, and this property again has 400,000+ square feet. We tried to find very high volume leases, which every one of these is, I think, at least 100,000 square feet. And what are they renting for? What was the most recent rents we could find in the market? And I won't go through these in detail because we'd be here all day, but you can kind of see the rental comps on the right-hand corner of each of the six is up on the top right, and the square footage is to its left. And again, these are the most current ones that we could find in this market, and they vary anywhere from, I think one was at $10 a square foot, the second comp, up to $18, $19, with the majority being in between, lower than 19, of course. So again, we used $20 a square foot on this 2001 property, subject property, and we believe that's more than fair of what this would possibly get as of the assessment date. And that's all I have to present. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I was just flipping through the comps you were showing. Your cost analysis at the very end, is there anything in particular about that one you think is relevant, or you think the income approach?
Yeah, I just had an income approach. I did not submit a cost approach, just income.
Okay.
I think the cost approach may have been the assessors, if you're looking at one. I did not submit a cost approach.
Was it? Oh, okay, good. Then it was attached to my packet that usually is all yours. And that's the reason I wondered about it. All right, I will ask the assessor staff who is in charge of this particular property to address the board.
Hi, good afternoon. Zach Lay, Tulsa County Assessor's Office. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Doing good. We find that the most direct approach is the cost approach, and I'll explain why, but here's a brief rundown where we're at. We're about 9 miles northeast of Tulsa CBD, so we're here in Cherokee Industrial Park. Some neighbors here. Again, this is a highly sought after area, so we have, Whirlpool here, Verizon Corporation's right there, their corporate offices, Nordam. That's just some of the folks in the neighborhood. And here's a street view of this data center. It's, as he said, it's about 430,000 square feet, situated on 60 acres on the corner of Lakewood and 76th Street North. Here's a 3D rendering of it, and you can see this is a special property. That's why we disagreed so much. I don't think you can look at a property like this in a general industrial scope. We have some special attributes here. We have cooling towers. This back portion right here, which was expanded in 2008, has a raised floor area for the servers and different data storage components. And again, it's a highly sought after area. And if we look at the current, where we're at today, it's on for an allocated sale price. So this property sold in 2014 for 150 million, which included the larger site right here on 60 acres. And then this like little sliver of land, excess land that's backwards like a J there. And whenever we deducted this land value out, we arrived at 149,880,200. That's where we're at today. We don't find that the income approach is applicable here without supported information. And as we go through this, if you want to look at, I believe, the lease comps that Scott provided, we don't find that BOK Tower, Boulder Tower, Cityplex Towers is comparable to something like this.
Okay, let me ask a couple of questions, just right off the top of my head, Zach.
Okay.
Do you know, was this built specifically for them, or did they purchase it? You said what, 2014?
Yes.
Who did they purchase it from? Was it built also as a data center from the beginning, or have they added to it and created this?
It was a long time leased to EDS, and then in 2014, Hewlett Packard bought it. And then they merged with CSC to form DXC Technologies. So that's currently who's occupying the building. It's owner occupied again, so there's no rental information as to this specific property on the income side. So we're relying on the sale price that's allocated historically for the past 7 years, and to cross check it, we did a cost approach, like he was mentioning, and I'll provide the support here in a minute. So we feel that the property is at least worth 150 million or 149,882. So that's why we indicated that, you know, yes, there was an allocation to this sliver of land here. However, HP bought it. They still own it through an affiliate, and it appears to be reasonable. So it's not less than the allocated pricing. I provided to the clerk, and you might have a publication from Ryan. That's this presentation we're looking at right now, but I have a publication from Ryan that guided me,
It'll be attached.
Oh, it's attached,
and
okay,
it's a few pages, so I don't expect you to read through it, but
yeah.
it's entitled, is it ever appropriate to use the income approach to value data centers for property tax assessment purposes? As I read through, and I was trying to consider the income, we consider all three approaches every time we value property. Here, to paraphrase, they call these data centers powered shells in the industry. And that's really where you have the servers and everything, the raised floors. If there is insufficient reliable market data, like lease comps of other data centers, do not use the income approach. Give the cost approach indication more weight. And so that's what we looked at. We said, okay, on a cost basis, where's the value? And I have another long
Yeah,
legal.
here's where, it's in your packet supposedly, Drew. Not the little one, but the big one.
I have an attachment there, and it's more comprehensive than what's on the screen.
Okay.
So we can just look at the screen if you'd like to. But if you want to know what the math is behind the cost approach, it's all right here. So we're saying replacement cost new for data centers per Marshall and Swift is about 153 million, but you have to add profit in the cost approach. So we added 5%, and then we allocated for depreciation based on Marshall and Swift. So that came out to roughly 9.2 million in depreciation. So you deduct that, you add the land, and then if you round it off, it's 154 million. So basically, our claim here is that it's not worth less than what it's on for today on the assessor records. And it's further supported by the cost approach, which has come out to 154 million.
Okay, you're showing, and when you say cost approach, you're saying that we started with the purchase of land and built this. We'd be putting this much money into it, to get it up to where it is being used now. Right?
More specifically, the land's at market value. So what that land would transact for, right? So there's the land. And then more specifically, the replacement cost new less the depreciation. And the cost is nice because it's more direct and it's fee simple. And whenever he mentions fee simple, that's the caveat to the income approach on a property like this. You might capture some business enterprise value and have to allocate it out, but the cost approach is truly a fee simple approach to value. So we just take what the manual tells us is the base cost to build a data center. And then I made some adjustments in the write-up here for the air conditioning as advised for the cost approach in Marshall and Swift. And I was very reasonable on the market parameters and came to a value of 154 million.
So essentially, I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
In my head, the difference here is between you and presentation Mr. Taylor made as approaches to value. Is he's saying, he's trying to imagine if he had to go into the market now and rent this is where he would come out. He thinks it would not pull more rent than, I believe his number was $20 a square foot. Your approach is to say that's not really what would happen to a building like this. It's either going to be continuing use as it is now, or if you had to rebuild one like this and sell it to somebody who wants a data center, that this is what it would cost them to put that thing together that we have already here.
Your latter point is correct on the cost approach. That's what the cost approach is. And on the previous point that you made on the income side, hard pressed to find the information. It's really beyond maybe, I guess it's beyond CBRE's resources to find data center lease comps. But I thought we'd maybe have a conversation where we arrived at what data centers are leasing for based on CBRE's information. I was a little let down to find that it was just more of a general, if this was a vacant industrial warehouse, but unfortunately this property has cooling towers and raised floors for servers and has to accommodate for a certain climate control for the servers to keep them cool and operational. So you have a unique property here. The best way to handle it, cost approach. And then cost approach comes in pretty close to what the historical sale value is. So that's why we kept the historical sale value.
All right, Mr. Taylor, I'm going to ask the other members of my board to ask any questions or make comments they want to either of you. But then I'll give you obviously an opportunity to address what Zach has been saying is his approach, the cost approach versus your income approach. Charles, do you have any immediate questions of Mr. Taylor?
I do. Your comps look like they were high rises south of town. And the property under conversation is more of a sprawling, spread out manufacturing. So I guess I'm struggling as to how those are comps.
He didn't provide the comments, did you? No, it's Mr. Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah.
As Zach mentioned, we here at CBRE, we have a pretty vast appraisal group, and there are simply no comparable rentals in the market. We simply don't have them. But what we do have, as given here, is we do know what the highest rents are in the county. And we do know we can see what the highest square footages that were rented recently. And so we went beyond that and used a round number of $20 a square foot, which again, if we had rental comps, it would be great. And so to answer your question, these are the best rental comps that we had in this market. Yes, could we have gone to California or to New York or Atlanta maybe and found some rental comps on a property like this? Yes, but it wouldn't be the same. You know, it's simply not the same property. They're not the same year bill. They're either smaller or larger, and they're certainly in different markets with different rents.
Their other question I've meant to ask is there also a personal property assessment that is rendered on this operation?
Yeah, yes, but there's no concern to the personal property in this matter,
Well,
just real property.
Yes.
I understand that, but what I meant was, I was curious because obviously there's a lot of equipment in there, and you were saying they had to build floors up, air conditioning, all that. So I'm just saying, are we capturing that in a personal set?
Yes.
Okay, so you're paying for that too, is all I'm trying to get on.
Yes,
Yes,
you're exactly right. And as Zach said, that is on a separate assessment.
that's fine. That's all I was.
Yeah, and today, and that's why it's so important to rely on the cost approach. Now, can I speak to what Scott said about?
Well, I wanted to give them
okay,
both a chance, and then you can, and then
Yes.
we'll give Scott a shot also again. Please, Charles, were you in the middle of something that I interrupted? You want to go forward with that?
I'm not sure. The gap is so large there that I'm struggling.
Yeah, I know, that's me too. Well, Ruth, what about you?
I would like to know, how do you account for the sale price being at the 150 million and now you're taking that value away? How could you purchase that at that amount?
Yeah. Is that question for me? May I answer?
It is.
Yes, that sale, as Zach stated, was an allocated purchase price. And I inquired about that supposed sale, which I believe was gotten off CoStar, which CoStar is as we all may know, is a commercial real estate database that kind of goes out and researches these things. And sometimes they get the right answers, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they estimate things, whether it be a rental comp or a purchase price. And so I couldn't find anybody internally at DXC Technologies that knew anything about the allocated purchase price. But what they did know was that when HP years ago, 2014, purchased this property, they bought themselves out of a lease in order to purchase this property, which was significant, as we can imagine, as I've shown you with the rental rates here. And so there's two things, you know, when you look at a purchase price and determine whether that's a market value purchase price, there's two things going against this. Even if it is $150 million, which obviously would have a lot of going concern, which doesn't get down to the brick, mortar, and land, the real estate value, if you will. There's two things going against it. One, the buyer was involved in the property as a tenant, so that X's it out as a market sale. And second, there were several other properties that they bought out in the same seller. So, and third, if I may, it wasn't even a market transaction, meaning that it wasn't exposed to the market. It was they went direct. The tenant inquired about purchasing the property. The seller said, "Sure, we'll do that." And again, there's nobody here that will even verify that the property sold at the numbers that are mentioned today. And even if it was the number that we're mentioning today, it's not a market transaction.
All right.
Yeah, I would like your response.
Okay. It was filed with the county clerk's office. I mean, that's price tag 150 million. So it wasn't based off CoStar. That's why, okay, when we look at this and we value it on a cost approach, that's how we're able to eliminate all possible risk of it, including going concern. So whenever we apply that and then we cross-check it with the sale price, appears to be reasonable. HP was a tenant of the property prior to the sale. I'm not sure that's true. It's owner occupied now, so one would think that that was delivered vacant. Or, so I think that that should be explored further. But anyway, again, these properties don't go and get listed on CoStar for sale. And I'm not trying to make light of that. I'm trying to say that if it does sell, if it is marketed by any means, it's offered by word of mouth or in a back pocket of a broker. So they don't really sell that way. And we have to look at properties like this and how they buy and sell. So in this case, we've had it on for this price for 7 years. Prior to the 2014 sale, it was on for 170 million figure. So it was like 11 or 12% reduction when we adjusted it to the sale price. Scott provided to me some answers to questions like how's the condition of the property? The owner reported as good. Again, I just plugged those things into the cost approach, which cross-checked with the sales comparison approach, and which is on the market value of the sale, and find that to be reasonable. But I was having Tracy pull up the doc number for me. Do you have the document that it was actually on the county clerk records? Okay. What document?
2014-056038.
For 150 million.
Where's that document now and who filed that document?
It's a D file.
Yeah.
For the purchase of the two properties with the county clerk.
Okay, it is the deed.
Yes, it isn't something that we pulled from a MLS service or CoStar or something.
So somebody had to file that deed at some
Absolutely.
point.
So I don't know why they're not aware.
Who did it? Who filed it? That's what I'm still
Or how does
missing.
150 million
Yeah.
get there?
How did it get a deed filed in a government agency?
Well, there's no
by
conspiracy
somebody?
to it because it happens every day. It's
No, but there ought to be, Tracy, do we have a name on it other than this DX Technology Services?
The original deed from 2014 went from BNP Paribas Leasing Corporation to HP Enterprise Services LLC. And then later on, they went and filed a quitclaim deed to change the name again, which was in 2018, where it went from the HP Enterprise Services to the DXC Technology.
so to summarize that story is that it was purchased in 2014 from a leasing company by Hewlett Packard
And that
Enterprises.
leasing company is the one named Parnassus, is that what you said?
BNP Paribas Leasing Corporation.
So they
Leasing
bought it.
Corporation.
And they occupied it.
Okay. And maybe I'm just trying to drill down to say, who built this place?
Who built it?
Who built it? Yeah,
Well-
it sounds like it floats. The deed is good, a good legal deed, and you've got a number on it, so I'm willing to go with that, but I'm curious about how this building got built, by whom? Because the question I would then ask Scott is, do you have any cost figures that were transmitted from the original person or a firm that built this? That's my real question. What did they have to invest in? Mr. Taylor, do you have any information along those lines?
No, my client, DXC Technologies, does not have any of the original construction costs back in I believe the building was built in 2001. And I do not have that. And if I may, please.
Yes.
The cost approach as an appraiser, and I was an appraiser before I was a property tax consultant for many years. The cost approach is the least approach that you would want to take in determining what the market value is on a property. Because I can go in my little humble neighborhood here and build a $2 million house that doesn't make that house worth $2 million to the market. It simply doesn't. And on top of that, this property, which was again built in 2001, I believe, makes it 20 years old as of the assessment date. And to give it a 6% depreciation schedule like the assessor is doing, I mean, it's probably got a life of maybe what, Zach, 40 or 50 at best. And to give it only 6% depreciation on a cost approach, which again, we shouldn't even be talking about the cost approach, but to give it only 6% depreciation, that doesn't make sense.
Should I respond to that?
Yeah, respond to that.
Okay. I understand where he's coming from. However, if there's a lack of market support for the income approach, how can we rely on the income approach? Yes.
There's not a lack.
Yes, okay, I'll direct it back to the board. But all I'm saying is that I don't believe that pulling a CoStar report on office properties and looking at the BOK Tower and Cityplex Towers are comparable leases to something like this. And I was actually hoping for CBRE to have data on regional, maybe national data centers to pull in as lease comps, and we could look at this property because it's so unique.
What about that? I agree with you. It's unlikely that you could go to New York or California, but there are places that I bet you, at least Google, I know, is building data centers all over the place, including Oklahoma. You don't have any information about that?
I do not. I wish I did, because I highly don't think it would be above $20 a square foot.
Yes, I understand.
But I do not.
About that.
I do not. I'm sorry.
No, sure. Okay, other questions? I've chased my rabbits down some holes, but what other board members have questions?
Probably about to repeat myself. Somewhere along the line, someone had in mind that that was $149 million property. So was that an exchange of ownership someplace along the way that the market dictated that it's $150 million property?
As I understand the testimony from Taylor, but I just want to make sure I understand it from him, and then we'll give Zach a chance to answer your question, Charles. But as I understand, what he's saying was it was an internal thing where they were moving from leasing a property to deeding it into this other corporation, which is still an affiliate of HP, as I understood the story. Is that correct, Mr. Taylor? Did I hear you correctly?
Yes. There's a lot of variables there, but yes, if the question is whether HP and DXC are related, yes, they are. As Zach explained early on, the HP and CSC came together and formed DXC Technology, which is my client, which owns it today or owned it as of 2018.
And the reason I asked that was I was just saying somebody there, either HP or DXC Technology, must have agreed to put that number on the deed. Isn't that correct?
That's my.
No, that's not correct. Because again, that was a 2014 sale between HP and BNP, as Tracy read off of the deed. And let's please understand, these deeds are just a number that's put on there. Whenever you buy a hotel, an office building, or a property like this, there's going concern in all of those properties. So just because the property sells for, $100 million, that doesn't make that's what the real estate is worth.
Well, but you have to admit, I mean, at least in terms of what the board deals with all the time, is that one of the things that is brought in evidentially, either pro or against the assessor's valuation, is a arm's length legal sale that sets the fair market value And usually that part of that evidential record is what's on the deed that has been filed in the county. That's why I went back to that, Mr. Taylor.
Yes, and that would be true. And I agree with you 100%, but in this case, it's not. And it's not, as I said before, for at least two reasons, if not three. The first and most important reason is because HP was leasing the property at the time of purchase, so they had to buy themselves out of the lease. Now, that's a very complicated price there, and obviously multi-million dollars to buy themselves out of a lease of this type of property. And again, the second reason would be it's an allocated purchase price. So those two things alone do not make this an arm's length transaction. Because that $150,000, $150 million, that's not even a verified a purchase price on this single property.
Okay, I understand your position. What you're essentially saying is it does not meet the standard of the arm's length legal sale and therefore does not establish in that way. Okay, I'm gonna ask Zach to respond any way he wants, either to that or something else. Go right ahead, and then we need to decide.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to close. It's been verified through courthouse records. So verification's there. I know sometimes that's not the best thing we want, but if we have a courthouse record, we have a doc stamp, we have sale price, okay? Allocated pricing for the land, basically all we did was he saw that it was $150 million and there is no allocation to this small strip of land. If you may remember, that kind of looks like a backwards J. We already had that value though. We value everything. So we pulled that out and then allocated the rest to the larger site. That's standard practice in our office. We do it all the time. So you probably don't remember. And there was a headline in the Tulsa World for this property back in 2014-15, where we said this is the largest real estate only transaction to occur in Tulsa County history. I mean, think about it. It included 2 parcels here, but that's what we're dealing with. We're on a grand scale of property. Again, I found that this property was occupied by EDS prior to the sale, and it's probably leased to that company. And if there's any allocation that would be outside of a real estate only transaction, I do put that on the agent to provide that support, because we've had this on the books for 7 years.
7 years. All right. Other board members, do you have questions, comments of either of them? I'm not trying to close us down, but we do need to come up with something.
My sense is that somewhere along the way, there were some debits and credits that changed hands. It said, this is $149 million property.
Somebody did something or wouldn't have gotten past the auditor, right?
That's, I mean, some real money exchanged hands for $149 million. That's just plain old cost basis.
Ruth, what about you? I hear what our friend, the CPA auditor says. I tend to go with that, but.
I'm in agreement with that. If they paid 54 million.
I think we, Mr. Taylor, we're going to move to probably sustain what is currently on. And I think you've heard our discussion. There may be some confusion still, but the best data we have still suggests that there's been nothing that shows the board at today anyway that this property has declined in value in the dramatic way that you are suggesting we should be evaluated. In any case, I'll take the bull by the horn, as we say, and I will move to sustain. Is there another board member who will second my motion to sustain?
I would sustain, or a second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to sustain. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchum,
Yes.
Mr. Van Willen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
So ordered by action of the board that this is the fair market value, given the data we've been presented today. Mr. Taylor, did you have any other of the items on our agenda to represent?
I do not. I want to thank the board and for y'all's time and insight, and y'all have a wonderful day. Zach and Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it. Y'all have a good day.
We need to call.
The CAP Tulsa, no, that's an agreement.
Right.
All right, I got that, got this.
All right.
That was the only need on. Board, we're making progress slowly today. Sneaking down to 14. Oh, I see an orange. Label, yeah. Very slow. Okay, but we still need to call the guy. We don't. Okay, super. Then, what would you, identify yourself for the record and then tell me about the agreement?
Clint Vogt, Tulsa County Assessor's Office, based on an adjusted cost value, we've reached an agreement for a value of $475,000.
$475,000.
Yes, yes.
Okay. By the testimony from the assessor's staff, there was an agreement reached with the owner of this property to adjust it to $475,000. I so move by agreement.
Second,
It's been moved and seconded to adjust this fair market value by agreement. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchum,
Yes.
Mr. Van Wille,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
yes,
This is the fair market value by agreement. What you're suggesting, Gary, I'm trying to figure it out, but what it's problematic for you if I write on the actual thing, is that it, so you want me to make my notes here?
yes,
Okay.
because this is our record. that goes before.
Yes, I get it. Sorry, I just didn't know that was a problem.
54%.
Okay, we have moved on to the next item. And this is a telephone one again.
Yes.
Thank you. You're certainly getting all the exercise. I could use some of that. We may have to work out a way that the clerk doesn't have to do all of this, but so forth. She's holding it like this.
This is William.
William Marchbanks, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is.
This is the Tulsa County Equalization Board. I'm Ted Catchell, I chair it. My colleagues are Charles Vanderbilly and Ruth Gaines, and we're here to hear the protest you have lodged with the board. What we usually do is I'll read into the record the cover formal document you submitted, and then I will give you a chance to add whatever you want other than what I've read from the attachments you have given to the board. And then after that, of course, we'll hear from the Tulsa assessor staff who's dealing with this property protest, okay?
Okay.
Here we go then. This property is located at 6808 South 107th Avenue here in Tulsa. It was previously on for $16,375,500. After the informal, it was reduced to $12,443,000. He says in his formal appeal, however, that he believes a corrected value to be $8,200,000 for the following reasons. Based on the actual 2019-2020 performance revenue and the 2021 forecasted performance, the indicated market value is $6,290,000. Additionally, there are 3 pre-COVID sales and 1 post-COVID sale that indicates an adjusted value of $9,500,000. Due to the COVID pandemic, the Tulsa Renaissance suffered a 60% year-over-year decrease in occupancy and revenue. That's the formal statement as I have it in front of me. Mr. Marchbanks, what additional matters in the attachments you wish for the board to look at?
Okay, thank you very much. So included with that, it should be at the bottom of page 1, which is page 3 within that packet.
Yes.
That's the monthly performance report for this hotel, Renaissance Tulsa. You can see that the year-over-year occupancy was down by 60.3%. Now, I've had that highlighted. And the year-over-year revenue per available room is down 62.6%. And I know throughout COVID, we've seen a lot. There were some winners and some losers. And unfortunately, the hotel industry was one of the biggest losers as far as how they were affected as a result of the different regulations that occurred throughout that process in 2020. Now, if we continue on to read page 2, and that's the income pro forma, we've included the first column, which says 2020 actual at the top. That shows this is the actual company's actual performance throughout 2020. A negative gross operating profit of $53,000. If you continue down, it's net income of negative $480,000. So if we're just looking at a pro forma based on 1 year of performance, the value is actually a negative $7,085,000. Very bottom of being that value. So, knowing the way investors look at hotels, that wouldn't be the appropriate way to look at it. So, looking at historical performance and also your 2021 forecast, what one would expect the hotel to do in the coming years, we created the second column, which is as a bold line around it, 2021 pro forma. And that's using historical information as well as 2020 actuals, and then what the company's forecasting they're going to see in 2021. And using that information to come up with a number that, of course, is more, I guess, reasonable. Hotel's not going to be worth negative. That number has come in at, if you see at the very bottom, $6,289,000. And that's looking at net income, $919,686. The actual net income projected for this coming year is $464,000. But again, we'd like to look at the historical performance as well as actual to kind of get a better idea of what investors can pay for this hotel given the circumstances we're today. So income pro forma indicates $6,289,000, and then the following page, page 3, we've included 4 sales. Just to kind of get an idea of what the market's doing out there, and sales 1, 2, and 3 are all pre-COVID sales. And after we make adjustments for timing of the sale and location, size, whether or not there's convention center. And I'm skipping around. Sale number 4 is a sale that we found that occurred after COVID occurred or post-COVID. So you can see, if you're looking at the bottom, the sales price per key, which is, you look at the left column, is location, city, state, county. There's a sales price per key. And you can see the significant downward from sales 2 and 3 that range from 71 to 56 per room, down to 34,856 for a brand new hotel. So if we make the appropriate adjustments to compare this one to the subject, we're looking at 31,757 per key or room. And this indicates a value of around 9,530,000. So we're trying to weigh the sales that are available, which of course are limited given the market and how fast everything occurred throughout 2020. And we're weighing that with the actual income data that will be used in determining the investment worth of this hotel. And that's where we're coming in at 8.2 million.
Now, as I understand, what you were just doing is you were both working through and showing us what the keys would sell for, and you wanted to talk both pre-COVID and then post-COVID. Am I reading your document correctly that the subject, is that what the county has it on for on that page? Or is that?
And this is the last page.
Mine is sales comparison approach page. You're on beyond that. I was
Okay.
looking at the other pages with you, 1, 2, and isn't that 3?
Correct.
And weren't you just going over that? I thought you were talking about the keys.
Yes, the price per key or room
Right,
in the hotel.
right.
That the current price per key that the Tulsa County has on the Tulsa Renaissance is 41,477.
Okay, so you don't list it here on page 3, then, is that what you're telling me?
Correct. Yeah, it's not listed there.
Okay. We'll give the Tulsa assessor staff one moment here a chance to update me, but now you went ahead. Did I interrupt you and you were just going to go ahead to the where you were comparing it to others in the market? I assume this was what, did you have some comp sales you wanted us to consider?
Yes, that sales comparison approach, those are all comparable sales.
And these are within the last year or so?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so there were sales 1, 2, and 3 were prior to COVID, and then sale 4 was after COVID.
Okay. All right,
So-
was there another thing in terms of your presentation you wanted us to look at?
That was really it. we just wanted to be, the sales are limited, of course, because no one wants to sell something that they paid more for. So that this is used to kind of get an idea of what we're seeing out there in the market and then using that and weighing that against the actual income and performance and projection. So that's really it, unless there were any questions. I appreciate it.
And therefore, even after the informal and the adjustment that the assessor made down to the 12,000,004, you're still believing we should go down to this 8.2. What I was trying to understand as you were going through there is the highlighted thing on your page 2 was actually a 6,289,000. Is that what you are asking for today or not?
No, I'm asking for the 8,200,000, and that's taking into consideration both the 6,289,000
Yeah,
on the income pro forma and the 9,530,000 on the sales comparison approach, and using both of those to come up with what we believe is the market value for this hotel as of January 1st, 2021, looking at multiple approaches and not just depending on one approach only.
okay. And then you just essentially, all I'm trying to do now is that 8,000,002 then is not particularly demonstrated in the way you have shown us data today in your workup. Is that correct? Because you showed us other results from your workup and then just try to kind of split the baby and come up with a number in the middle. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes. So looking at basically what you said is exactly correct. We looked at two approaches: the income analysis and the sales, to come up with an opinion of value based on that information.
Okay.
Using those two approaches and not just relying on one only, but we wanted to see, here's the way it looks if you run the income and projections, and then here's what you can see in the market occurring.
Right. Got it. Okay. I'll ask the assessor staff to now identify herself and address the board.
I'm Tessia Davis. I'm with the Tulsa County Assessor's Office. Right off the bat, I want to highlight that I've already reduced the value of this property by 31% this year. If you look at the top left corner of page 1, the tax year 2020 value was $18 million. Before the informal, I had already reduced it by 11% to $16,375,500. And then after the informal, I decided to reduce it down to $12,443,000. So in all, that's a 31% reduction in the market, which is in line with the market for luxury hotels. It's the biggest reduction we've made for hospitality this year, is between 30 and 35%. So the total reduction value is over $5.5 million that we've already given. The tax rep is requesting $8.2 million as the value. That would be a $9.8 million reduction in value this year, or 54% reduction in value, which 5% cap on commercial, it would take over a decade to recapture the value or bring it back to the 2020 value. It's just food for thought. This year, part of the concessions I made was not to account for additional income made through extra amenities on the property, because a lot of them were shut down due to COVID. That being said, it's important to highlight the property details here. This is an upscale property. CoStar actually calls it an upper upscale property, but I would call it an upscale property. There's a 12-acre lot. It has a really strong flag. There's 300 rooms in total. 35 of those are suites, 14 meeting rooms, so over 50,000 square feet of meeting rooms. There's a restaurant, a bar, a fitness center, indoor pool, valet dry cleaning. It's packed with amenities, is what I want to highlight here. And then if we move to page 2, this is the page that I kind of had in every one of my packets this year. It's property valuation with consideration for COVID. So Every single hotel in Tulsa County was looked at regardless of BI cycle, and all income pro formas utilized no greater than a 50% occupancy rate, as the range shown by publication. So the range shown by the market was 52 to 55% occupied this year. In the top left corner, you can say hotel by impact by type. The most impacted was luxury hotels. There's no arguing that, and that's why we gave it such a steep reduction at 31%. If we move on to page 3, this is my income pro forma for this property. I use an ADR of $100, which is actually lower than marketed for this property. I couldn't find anything lower than I couldn't find anything lower than $120 marketed really for this property throughout last year and now this year. I used $100. It's the lowest ADR that I could support by the market for a luxury property. I used a 40% occupancy rate, so that's what was reported, a 60% occupancy. And then also at the bottom, you can see that I did not include additional income here, like I just said. That's a huge impact because there is an event center here. The property is heavy with business people coming through there. It was definitely hit hard, and that's why we used a 31% reduction this year. I do want to speak to the sales comparison approach that the tax rep brought up here. Sale and why I don't have sales comps. I didn't find any sales comps that were appropriate for this type of hotel for this year. There just simply was not a sale this year in our area that I could compare the Renaissance to. Sale number 1, number 2, and number 3. There's a lot of reasons why I probably would use these, but number 1 is these are pre-COVID sales. So they just do not reflect the market that we're in right now. The only post-COVID sale that he has listed here is not in our market. It's in Oklahoma City, and it's for a hotel that has 104 rooms, and this hotel has 300 rooms. So I can't really see it being all that comparable. So that's basically my presentation. Like I said, I'm definitely not arguing that relief had to be given to this property and that the market was damaged for hospitality. They certainly were the biggest losers, as he said, of COVID-19. And that's why I already gave it over a $5 million reduction this year.
Yes, that does sound like a lot of money to me. I was sitting here listening to both of you going through these. I know this is a very expensive property, a hotel in an excellent South Tulsa location, that it does do a lot of convention business, as well as you described, business travelers going and coming. Clearly, COVID has impacted. I think the issue that we're struggling with the board even today, but in some of our last meetings last week, is how do we deal with this once in 100 years pandemic without pretending that it's that there will be a lingering effect? There's no question about that, but trying to assess what percentage or what ratio of effect we can afford to recognize in an ongoing property tax situation is the dilemma before the board. It seems this whole hearing season. Enough of my sermon for today. You've heard her response to your presentation. I want to give you an opportunity now to respond to what the staff has just told the board.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess, ultimately looking at, I understand the property's been adjusted, and our only objective is to look at fair market value, and based on the information that we have, that from historical performance to actual performance, and then also forecasted performance, which no one's certain when things will go back to the way they were when it comes to travel, and certainly don't know when or if it'll ever get back to the way it was for not only just for hotels, but for conference centers, conferences, and things being done virtual these days. And one thing, and I forgot to include it, and this might be for the assessor's office to look at, we're currently at $41,480 a room. And there's the Marriott Southern Hills close by, there's a few DoubleTrees, and those hotels are, of course, there was a reduction this year, but the assessed per key for those hotels this year ranges from 27,000 to 31,000, which is $10,000 per room below where we currently are at the Tulsa Renaissance. So that was really just another concern whenever we're looking at reductions being made in similar hotels within Tulsa County is, are these other hotels in the same southern area in Tulsa that have very similar amenities or substantially lower per room.
Tessa, is that you confirm what you just said in your workup this year, that you guys have, that they're at the top, that is their key?
My response to that is that 31% reduction in value is really at the highest end of what I've reduced without help from the board or insight from the board.
Sure.
So those properties, regardless of key price, and key price can be skewed by number of rooms. I can't really speak to specifics there, but I can say that they certainly didn't receive higher than a 31% reduction in value this year when compared to 2020.
In any of the other hotels, is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
That was kind of the top of my range of what I felt comfortable reducing for luxury hotels.
Okay.
Along that very line of thinking there, it was at 16,375,500, and you took it down to 12,443,000. And the taxpayers asking for an 8,200,000, which is a 50% reduction.
Yeah, it's 54, correct.
Charles, I think the actual is 18 million.
Previous, yes, it was, I'm sorry. So, but then now we're asking for a further 50% reduction. That's,
As
to
you
me,
said,
that's staggering.
a 54%.
Yeah, it'll be an additional 23% reduction tacked on to my 31% reduction. So
Yeah.
in all, 54% this year.
Ruth, what about you? Charles is noting that, unsurprisingly, as a CPA auditor, that those numbers are so large in terms of us, what we're dealing here. But Ruth, did you have another kind of question or approach to either of the presentations?
The only thing I would ask or wonder about is in some of the other hotel presentations, we've seen the key or several different surrounding hotels. And I know this one is probably, I don't know. Why don't we?
The area is just not as condensed where, last week we were talking about downtown Tulsa, so it was a little bit more comparable. I couldn't find any hotels that were in a small radius that really reflected a similar property type.
Yeah.
I think
Well, I'm sorry,
reduction
go
is
ahead.
substantial. that they've received.
Okay. Where is the Marriott? Didn't we look at that last time we were together? I'm trying to remember. Seemed like.
Yes, we definitely looked at it this year. I don't know if that was last time or not. We looked at them all.
But you're saying that even when we looked at that, which I think is one of the ones that's comparable, but now I agree with you, the south location for the Renaissance is an extraordinary attraction. Debatable, some people love the downtown when they throw conventions, others very much want the kind of, I can do it all in one facility, which is clearly what the Renaissance provides. I think what Charles and Ruth have both identified is the remaining question in my mind also, Mr. Marchbanks, which is the county has essentially stepped down beginning from last year, as I see it here, at a $18 million valuation. First to 16,374, and then down now before the board at 12,443. As she says, that's a total reduction of almost a third. What is it? I mean, the county, how are we possibly trying to protect our tax base? How we possibly could, get back to what would be a reasonable one, even if, as we all hope, that normal is going to return in the next year or two. That's a huge reduction in just sheer value for a property. What do you think, Mr. Marchbanks?
Well, I can understand, I do understand that it is a big request, and the objective here, of course, is just to arrive at a fair market value of what this hotel could sell for as of January 1st of 2021. And based on the numbers that we've been provided in projected numbers, unfortunately, hotels are in a lot of hot water. One operating in the red in 2020 and then projecting minimal net income going forward without with the unknown of not knowing when things are going to return to the way they were. And then when things do start to return to some type of normal, quote unquote, how many people have become used, the people that traveled every week. I was one of those people, and a lot of people have figured out they don't need to travel and be in person as much as they used to be.
Yes.
So the value of hotels may never, at least in the foreseeable future, get back to where they once were.
Yes, I mean, it's always difficult for any of us to predict the future. And I think certainly hotels have the right to raise that question. My own sense is there's a lot of people who are really excited about being vaccinated and getting back together with other people. It may go, some reporting I was listening to yesterday on one of the cable business programs was celebrating the fact that everybody was they were booming some of the stuff that had been lost, particularly in terms of hospitality services in areas such as hotels, restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, enough of my comments. I am inclined to sustain the 12,443,000, but I want to hear my other board members on that. Is there another idea, either another number, you think you should come in with something that gets perhaps not as close as he is asking, the 8.2, but is giving a little bit more break for another year?
I'm willing to sustain.
Okay. Charles, how about you? You're
No, I would, it's just no doubt they're suffering financially.
Yeah.
But that's just my mind. That's a 50% cut where they were last year. That's just, they just
Too big a number to swallow. Okay, I think you've done a good job of making us go through our issues here, Mr. Marchbanks, but I think the board appears to be of the opinion, which I will move as a motion now, to sustain the current value of the assessment, a fair market value of $12,444,000. Is there a second to my motion?
I think it's 1,200,443.
did I say it wrong? 12,443,000, right?
Yes.
That is my motion.
Second motion.
It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote as the roll is called to sustain.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes.
Mr. Vanderwiller,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
Yes, the board is act. This is the fair market value for this luxury hotel. Mr. Marchbank, do you have anything else before the board today to hear?
That is it for me. I appreciate everyone's time.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the copy we're getting? Well, anyway, you can sort that out. You seem to have double copies here.
that's okay.
Okay. If you.
I'd rather have more than none.
Not enough, I understand.
These are the next three.
Okay, and we do have an agreement. And an agreement. Oh, God has taken mercy upon us today.
Have one more.
Oh, she's always such a spoiled.
I know,
isn't
maybe
she?
they
All right, we'll go through these. The next, here, we'll go with this one. The next item on our agenda is 1437, yes,
Yes.
1437 Ham LLC. And it says here that this property is located at 12101 South Waco Avenue in Glencoe. It was previously on for 1,231,300. They were proposing to leave it at that. He says in his request that he believes it should be reduced to 1,150,000. Market trends using the cost approach and the age approach suggest this reduction. All right, I see we have the orange tag of agreement. What is the, please identify yourself officially.
Tracy Conley with the Tulsa County Assessor's Office,
Thank
and we have an agreement of 1,150,000.
1,150,000 even as the fair market value by agreement with the owner. I so move. Is there a second to my motion to support this agreement? Second. It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes.
Mr. Vanderwiller,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
The board has acted to accept this agreement as the fair market value. And next on our agenda is item number 1438. The Fort LLC, Eddie Lopez also. And I see the orange tag, but let me read it into the record and then we'll proceed with seeing if there is an agreement. This property is located 1901 East Hillside Drive in Broken Arrow. It was previously on for 1,261,500. After the informal, they were proposing to leave it at that. He says in his appeal that he believes it should be corrected to 1,150,000. Market trends using both the cost approach and the income approach. Therefore, Tracy, what's the agreement?
Tracy Conley with the Tulsa County Assessor's Office. The agreed upon value is $1,150,000.
Okay. $1,150,000 by agreement. I move that we accept this adjustment by agreement as presented by the Tulsa Assessor staff. Is there a second to my motion?
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded to adjust this fair value by agreement. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Catchell,
Yes.
Mr. Van Wellen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines.
Yes.
So ordered by action of the board to accept the agreement. Okay. And next up is item number, well, let's see, do I have? There it is, okay, French, 1439, French LLC, also Representative Eddie Lopez. This property is at 101 South 97th Highway, West Sand Springs, Oklahoma. It was on for 1,252,100. They were proposing to leave it there, but he's requesting again, be reduced to 1,150,000 because the market trends using both cost approach and income. And what do we have here then?
Tracy Conley with the Tulsa County Assessor's Office, and we have agreed to a value of $1,150,000.
Okay. I move that the board accept this agreement to adjust to 1,150,000 as the fair market value on this property. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Catchell,
Yes.
Mr. Van Wellen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines.
Yes.
This is the fair market value by agreement. And we now dealt with the next two items on the agenda, so we're at the last item on our agenda, 1448, Sheridan Tulsa Investors. And is this a telephone?
Yes, it
Looks
is.
like it is, okay. Let's see if it goes to the machine. I don't know, Sarah, what do you think? Normal that you spend time with this Mr. Federer?
Pretty lengthy, informal. I haven't spoken to him since.
The other thing I can imagine is, do we have the wrong phone number? Do you have another record? This is the one, obviously Debbie has.
Here's the number I have.
4443-3177, and it comes up his name.
And it did come up his name.
We have another phone. We can try that.
Okay.
We're sorry, your call.
We know.
We're really.
Boy, it took them a long time to get there though.
Hello?
Hi, this is Austin Federer,
Oh,
returning
good.
call of.
All right. He's on the line.
Mr. Federer, Hello.
Hello.
Hi, we tried one phone number, didn't have any luck, and we're glad we got through to you. This is Ted Catchell. I chair the Tulsa County Equalization Board. My colleagues that will also participate in this decision is Charles Vanderwilly and Ruth Gaines. What we usually do is I read the kind of first 2 pages of your formal appeal, and then you'll have an opportunity to address it and add whatever materials or go through the ones you've already submitted. Then we'll give the assessor staff, who is also working on this appeal, a chance to address the matter. After that, we'll discuss a while and try to come to a decision today. Does that sound reasonable, sir?
Yes, it does, sir.
Okay, here we go then. Board, this is, by the way, the Sheridan investor, Tulsa investors. This property is located at 10011 South Sheridan Road here in Tulsa. It was previously on for $13,500,000. After the informal, the assessor was still proposing to leave that as the current value. In his appeal, he says he believes it should be corrected to $11,958,022 for the following reason. The property assessment is above the value indicated by a fee simple income approach. All right, Mr. Feder, please address the board any way you wish to about this matter.
Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm so sorry I missed the first call. Hope you guys are all doing well.
We're doing well. So,
Great.
please go right ahead. Do you want us to go through some of the attachments, or did you want to?
Yes, that would be great. So if you look, we've got our cover page that kind of just summarizes where we're at, where the assessment is at, and where our opinions of value. You can see our opinion of value using the income approach is at $11,958,022. We arrived at that value by doing a fee simple income approach using the income and expense assumptions recognized by the appraisal district and the actual operating performance of the property. I'll walk through our analysis in a minute here.
Sure.
And then we also looked at recent sales in the past 2 years in Tulsa County of comparable properties and used that to determine an appropriate sales value of $10,067,807. So that's kind of where our value range is coming in. On the second page, you'll see a photo of the property. You'll see the signage is just kind of, not great. It's not permanent, kind of temporary signage for that Bellevue at Sheridan. The page after that shows a map where the location of the property. Third page is an aerial, and fourth page is an aerial. Now, if you follow me onto this fifth page, is our pro forma analysis.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
So in the right column, you'll see 2020 actual. Those are the actual income expenses that the property had in 2020 year end. So the value of this property on a go forward basis, we use those as a base for projections and applied certain assumptions that's recognized by the appraisal district. For example, a market vacancy and collection loss of 9% versus that 7.4% actual. Management fee at 3%, which is in line with the actual. We took out our tax number, and then reserves for replacement of 5% of EGI, which is the same as recognized by Tulsa County Appraisal District. which gets us to our net operating income of 926,747. We divide that by the cap rate that Tulsa CAD uses to value comparable property of 7.75%, and that's how we arrived at that $11,958,022 number. And this is the same way we value properties, and it's the same way the appraisal district values property. So we just want to get some recognition for the actual operating performance. I believe during our discussions last year, the appraisal district said they had a certain market expense ratio. I think we have to recognize the actual expenses for the property. What it actually costs to run the property, not some hypothetical expense number based on surveys and stuff. This is the actual data. So the page after this is our multifamily sales comparables. We looked at recent sales in the past 2 years to identify what an appropriate sales price is per unit. So we figured this could give us a good indication of what the market is willing to pay. We found that the average price per unit of comparable properties is $39,327 per unit. To come up with our indicated sales approach value, we took that number and multiplied it by the units in the subject property. So 39,327 multiplied by 256 units. That's how we arrived at 10,067,807. So it's a fairly close range between 10 and $12 million is our opinion of value. Behind that survey, we have our income statement, which shows you where I got the numbers for our market rent and expenses assumptions, and what the 2020 actual operating performance of the property were. You can see additional line items this year, like COVID-19, lost revenue, bad debt is very high, vacancy was high. This is, in all, the property as of 1/1/2021 had experienced a year where it suffered from complications due to COVID-19, and it's not any more valuable. It's not as valuable as it was the year before. So I think there has to be some recognition of the damage that was caused by the pandemic this past year. And that the rest of the package is really just those income and expense documents in our appointment of agent form. So that is, in summary, our appeal position.
Okay. We're going to ask the Tulsa assessor staff to address the board, and then we will let the board ask questions of either of you and see where we can go in this discussion.
I'm Sarah Alcock, Tulsa County Assessor's Office. Hi, Mr. Federer, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I think we went over you covered really well some of the details of the property. It's got 256 units. It's located in South Tulsa, about 101st and Sheridan area, which is a very good South Tulsa area. Built in 1985. There was last a sale on this property in 2018 for $15.4 million and change. So that's something that we need to take into consideration, and I'll touch on that a little later too.
That's not the current owner.
It is the current owner. That was the most recent sale, was in 2018. In my opinion, this apartment would fall within a class C, but maybe a C plus. I want to put a kind of a contingent thing on the way I would class this because of the location. We all know 101st and Sheridan, if anyone knows who, if you live here, everything within 5 square miles of that area is very, very nice. Not to mention the fact that although they are 1985 build, they have been very, very well maintained compared to some other properties that were built that year. On the second page of my presentation, I've just included some photos from their website. So you can see the interior and exterior condition of the property. It has the amenities you would expect for a B, C class. It has some nice resting pond areas, swimming pools, a gym, etc. Just kind of some of the standard amenities. Now I'd like to turn to my page 3, which is my income approach.
Is this property, I'm just looking at the exterior photo now, but how would you describe the living units? Are they, I mean, obviously they're apartments, but I mean, it's like 3 or 4 on a column, on a, everybody. That is, it's 3 or 4 stories tall and the apartments are stacked that way in these various units, or is it less so?
As far as I know, and I have just recently went out and looked at the property, it's a 3-story property.
Okay,
I'm not aware of any townhomes. It may contain some townhomes. I'm not entirely positive,
sure.
but I think the style of it is going to be flats, 5 stories, 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. And floor through apartments, probably. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry.
Floor through,
Yes.
yeah,
Breezeway, floor through
yeah,
to
okay.
approach. Yeah, and you can see the exterior photos here. I mean, they are a little older, 1985, but
Yeah,
they're in, for that year build in comparison to other apartments like it, it's in fantastic condition. They've managed it very, very well. Okay, here's my income approach. I have, Mr. Fitter provided me with, I don't have the comp set that he mentioned to you guys, but he did provide me with the rent roll and financials, which was incredibly helpful. So I'll start with my potential gross income. You'll notice that my potential gross income is about 2.36 million annually, whereas he's projected a 2.065. I'm not sure if he's using on that because I'm using the potential gross income from the actual rent roll that was provided. I'm using the market rent on that because that's the place we need to start and then give it vacancy and collection discount.
I can speak to that real quick, if you don't mind. There's a gain and loss to lease that we recognize that's in the actual operating statement. You know, there's base rent and then there's a loss to lease. The amount you're losing because tenants' leases in place are lower than the market. You can't just go in and boot those tenants out and release those at the market rate. Does that make sense?
are you saying that some of the leases are long-term and they got in at a lower rental rate?
That's correct. The market rates have increased, you know, since these leases have been in place. So to say that the market rent as of 1/1 is going to be applied to all units is unrealistic.
And your actual numbers that you provided, Sarah, indicate this? Is that what you're saying? Did your actual numbers, your financial statements, did they indicate that there was that difference?
Yes, they did.
I see what I understand what he's saying, and I do see on the financials where there is a discount for loss to lease. If we're going to go by actual rents instead of market rents, we also have to consider the fact that we could use potentially a 5% actual vacancy and collection, but we're not. I'm using a 9%. So giving them that additional 4% according to market parameters might probably most likely accommodate for where I'm not coming in with the loss to lease where he did. Does that make sense?
Certainly. Did he use the 5%? Is that what you're saying?
I believe he gave it 9%. And it looks like vacancy and collection, and plus there's a concession here of $47,584. So it's quite a high, it looks like 2% concession and 9% vacancy that he gave it, which is about a 9% discount overall. And that's on top of the loss to lease starting point at $2,065,000 where he's starting as the potential gross income. So
The only difference between the actuals and the pro forma assumptions we made, the actual concessions are that 47,584. Those were in place all of last year. At year end, that's the actual concessions. The actual vacancy for last year was 7.4% versus the 9%. We're happy to go down to 7.4. I think that's going to come up with a much more reasonable number than the 13.5.
Okay, so I've applied a 9% vacancy and collection loss
Right.
to the market rent. And then I have an additional income that I used here on my income approach of $352,000. And that was provided, and it's clear here, he has that as well added back into the effective gross income. So I've got a management expense of 3%, which is in line with his income, 41% overall expense ratio, which is in line with his. I've got, I think where we're differing is that he's got $109,000 plus on the reserve, which I've got about $89,000. That's not a huge difference there. But the overall expense ratio, I think we're looking at 50% or 58 expenses for his, and my market estimate is 48%. 58 for this type of property, according to market parameters, is a little high. So once I calculated expenses, I've given it a pretty generous loaded cap rate here at 8.5%. Properties in this submarket, in this area of town, in this type of condition with its rents are selling in the 6.5 to 7 cap range, maybe even lower. So I feel like 8.5% is pretty generous. I think he's got a 7.75%. So once I do that business personal, I have $14.972 million as my income conclusion on the value.
You say you added back in business personal?
I deducted business personal.
I'm sorry, I never got a chance to see the appraisal district's income workup, so I'm working off the phone based on what you're saying, so
Business
it's kind of
personal.
hard for me to follow along.
Oh, okay, business personal is discounted.
No. Okay, I just don't understand how we can be so far off. I think it goes back to that base rent line where you're about $300,000 higher than the actual. So that 2-point spread in vacancy, which is about $30,000 in difference, isn't going to make up for that $300,000 difference you make in the base rent assumptions. And then on top of that, it's using a much lower expense ratio, which I had brought up in my initial statement, that this is what the appraisal district has been doing.
Okay, well, I'm using market expenses and a vacancy and collection rate that is a market rate. We are mass appraising here. I'm not using actuals down the line. So maybe that's where we're off a little bit, but I'll finish my presentation if you don't mind. Thank you. So the next item on here would be the value summary history. You can look at tax years 2019, 20, and 21. We actually put it on for the sale price in 2019. It was determined to be a valid sale at that time at $15.434 million. It came under protest. We denied it at the informal level, and then the board lowered it at the formal level to $13.5 million. It was protested again and sustained. At tax year 2021, we're at $13.5 million currently is where we have it. So if you'll turn to the very last page here, I have a comp set that I pulled from CoStar. And you'll see, if you look at the addresses on East 71st, East 66, 65th Street South, 66th Street South, they're all close within a few miles of the subject property. And they're all of the same class and the similar year built, similar size units wise. And all the sales are within the last 1.5 years. But you'll see that they range anywhere between 61,500 to 65,141 unit. I don't see any sales on this class and quality of apartment in this type of area anywhere near the range of 39,000, as Mr. Feder asserts with his set of sale comps. I would see in that range, I would see something that's more actually bordering on a D-class apartment complex. Maybe a lot of my Section 8, fully Section 8 apartments are valued about that per unit. This is certainly a far cry from that D-class $39,000 to $40,000 range per unit. This property is mortgaged at $11.5 million, which if we give it an 80-20 debt ratio, we have about $14,375,000 invested in this mortgage. And then my conclusion here is that I'm looking at the 2018 sale price, and I think it's holding up. I'm looking at the apartment market, which all I have done for the last 6 months is research the apartment market. That's my specialty. And at least in Tulsa County and the surrounding areas, and even in Oklahoma statewide, apartments are performing at peak levels. COVID has done something in the way that it has unfortunately, sadly driven people from their jobs and from home ownership into apartment living. So we have seen record high occupancy rates to the point where almost everything I look at is between 1% and 3% vacancy, which is outstanding performance for these apartment owners, and I'm happy for them. But I know with the COVID argument is that they're having a lot of collections and things like that. However, the performance and the sheer occupancy rate and the fact that most of these apartment communities in Tulsa, like this one, have wait lists, I just can't see that there's a real and true long-lived COVID argument to make for lowering the value in that aspect. So I stand by the sale price, the sale value. I feel like it was strong at 15.3 million. My pro forma supports 15 million. Now we have to remember that we have it on for 13.5 million. So even if Mr. Federer is correct that I might be a little off on my potential gross income, it's not going to bring it down under 13.5 million if I adjusted it. I can tell you that. Sales comparisons support, in my opinion, a value of 16.3 million. And the way I concluded that was if you look at my sales comparisons here, they're highlighted in yellow. So this Somerset Park at Union Apartments, they're right behind Union High School, just north of Union High School, huge complex, highly comparable, same rent square foot. It was built 2 years older. It's very, very well maintained, sold in October 2019. So I basically chose that as my comparable because you'll see these two comps here in the middle, Park 1010, very, very comparable. So I settled on about 63,000 a unit times 256, which is the number of units in the subject property. So I come up with about 16 million in a sales comparison support value. I don't know if you have any other questions about that. I think that concludes all my information.
Okay. Mr. Federer, please feel free to either ask questions or make comments about
Sure.
this.
I would just like to make one comment, this is back to the income approach in our pro forma. To say that the appraisal district is a little bit off is putting it mildly. They're about 15% over what the actual base rent is, which is a substantial number, about 300,000. If you put that at a 7.75 to 8.5 cap rate, that's about $3.5 to $4 million in value difference. So by no means a little bit off. So I think we have to really recognize what the property is actually pulling in, what kind of income it's actually generating, not based on market rents and market expenses. This is, we're trying to get some recognition here for what's actually going on in the property. And this is how we arrived at the value last year through the ARB process. The appraisal district wanted to recognize market rents and market expenses, and the ARB listened to our argument in our presentation and recognized that, okay, the net operating income declined about 30% year over year, and there has to be some sort of recognition. At some point, there's got to be some reconciliation between what's going on with the market and what's going on with the property. And sometimes the two don't match up, and that's the case here.
I guess the only thing I would point to is the board has been fairly responsive to your argument about that. Over the last 2 years, I believe, we did finally stop coming down. What do you say about the 2018 sale at the 15,434,000? The owner was willing to invest at that time.
Well, obviously the year after that, that's what the investment was at, and the income supported it at the time. Unfortunately, since that acquisition, the property hasn't performed to their underwriting assumptions, and it's underperformed, which is why the value has since fallen. I think all of that makes sense and it's justified. The assessment trend has been in line with how the property has been performing. When you're underwriting and assuming when you're determining a purchase price for a property, you make certain cash flow assumptions about the future. And, year one, they were hitting their mark, and it was making sense. And then they weren't, and then COVID happened. Although maybe the apartment market held up better than other asset classes, they certainly weren't able to generate the revenue growth that they had expected to when they initially bought the property 3 years ago.
Yes, I agree. They haven't met those expectations. My other two board members need to have a chance to ask their questions or make their comments of either of you now, please.
Okay.
What is the price per unit for the Bellevue? Is it in this?
Yes, I think it's currently about 59,000 plus. I can get you an exact number here. $256 units. It's at, oh, that's all right.
259 units is what he uses, but
Oh, okay. We're differing on that slightly. I'll go with what the assessor has. 52,734 a
okay.
unit.
What was that again?
52,734 a unit.
Times the 256 units.
Yes, it's on the tax roll for $13,500,000 currently. And if I divide that by the number of units, which is 256, I arrive at $52,734 per unit. A lot of numbers to say all at once. I will say on my pro forma, I did a quick crunch of numbers. I took my PGI down to where he's at $2,065,000 and just plugged in the actual vacancy, the actual additional income. I used my same operating, we are different on operating expenses, but sometimes it has to do with, sometimes it comes down when there's an apartment that's 10% higher than most. Because when I say I'm using market expenses, it's what most apartments like this fall, where they fall. So if they're falling under or over that, sometimes it's a management or performance issue temporarily at least. But I have to stick to market expenses. I cannot use theirs because I am doing mass appraisal. But when I come up with an NOI of 1.18 million and I apply an 8.5 cap to that, I still have a value of 13,882,000, and that's using his base rent here, because that was the big argument, was that my PGI was too high, so I took it down to where he's starting. And just to show you how it would affect it if I went that way with him, with his number on that. However, I do have to go with market rent in mass appraisal situations.
Other questions or comments? Charles, did you want to ask anything? I did note the thing you are both are differing with each other on. The OER, the difference is almost 10 points, so that is significant, obviously. Oh, what about the mortgage? Mr. Federer, do you know anything? Has anything changed in terms of their loan situation? If they're carrying 11.5, some bank must think they're pretty good shape.
There's been no change in the mortgage since the acquisition, to my knowledge. Presumably, they've been, making timely payments, but that's not something I'm aware of at the moment.
Okay. Charles, did you have nothing? Are you willing to vote to sustain then? Is that why?
I would be very willing to vote to sustain.
Okay. Ruth, what about you? I haven't heard you ask anything that made me think you were willing to bring it down, but am I misreading the question and comment you asked?
No, I'm willing to sustain.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Ferrer, I think whatever income loss in these apartment complexes has happened because of COVID, it is very, very difficult, as the assessor staff has said, to find it in terms of the apartment complexes that have come before the board so far this year. We do find that they are tending, even as it appears yours report on this complex, they're maintaining a fairly high success. So the only thing I was curious about was when you brought up the thing about the lease loss. I can imagine that having some impact, but I still think it's marginal in terms of overall future performance that anyone would project. In any case, the board appears to be going to sustain. I'll give you one last comment if you wish.
Okay. Oh, for me.
Yes.
No, that's okay. I understand the position you all are in, and I sincerely appreciate you hearing my presentation and the opportunity to appeal. But I certainly recognize where you all are coming from.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will ask my board member, either one of you want to put the motion in?
I move that we sustain the fair market value at 13,500,000.
I will second that motion to sustain. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchum,
Yes.
Ms.
to
Van Willen?
sustain.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
This is the fair market value by vote of the board this day. Mr. Federer, thank you. I think that finishes our agenda today. Hopefully yours also.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. You all take care.
You too.
Thanks, Austin. See ya.
place where we could vote to adjourn ourselves. Is there a motion to that effect?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote as the roll is called to adjourn.
Dr. Catchell,
Yes.
Ms. Vanderwill.
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.